I'm really grateful to be here again at the Stars and Stones Forum. I was lucky enough to be here at the first one as well, talking about my other area of research, which is based upon earth energies and scientific analysis of how they used them for seed production in ancient times. But today I'm coming back to my hometown of Cambridge, where I was brought up and lived there for the first 25 years of my life. Since the age of 8 years old, I lived in Cherry Hinton, which is a small village not far from Wandlebury, and I always used to go up Wandlebury as a child and as a teenager and in my early 20s as well for various other things, and I was very drawn to the place. I had a real good feeling about it. It's always been regarded as an Iron Age hill fort by the archaeologists and historians of the area, but the research of the O'Briens, Christian and Barbara Joy O'Brien, in the 70s has kind of it's helped rewrite the history of this place, and it's stimulated a whole area of research for myself and others at Wandlebury. When I was quite young, I did hear of stories about a place called the Giant's Grave, which is at the other end of Cherry Hinton, at the base of the Magog Hills, and there's a spring there as well. And there was a story that giants were buried there, and they actually found skeletons. And I kept hearing about this, but I kind of thought nothing of it. I thought it was just some kind of myth. But recently I found that actually on the top of Limekiln Hill, which is just past Wandlebury, just past Cherry Hinton on the way to Wandlebury, there's a site that was excavated in about over 100 years ago, and actually did find some giant skeletons there. So the Giant's Grave theory, which has been sort of floating around at the school, because our school, Netherhall, was actually on the side of the Magog Hills. It kind of we didn't really know anything about it, but just at the top of the hill we used to go running in and playing in as kids. It was actually a very ancient site, which it was termed the War Ditches, which we'll have a look at this site as well later. But further over the hills, towards Great Shelford and Stapleford, we have Wandlebury, which is the site I'm going to be focusing on today. So when I first read a book called The Son and the Serpent by Hamish Miller and Paul Broadhurst, this really opened up a whole avenue of research for me. I was never interested in history at school. I don't know anyone who was, actually. But for me, I found it incredibly boring. All the kings of Britain, who won the wars, no interest at all. I wasn't compelled. I didn't want to look any further into the past. I read the book The Son and the Serpent, and that opened up a whole avenue of understanding about the subtle nature of history and the way the ancients actually worked with the landscape, and they worked with these sacred sites. And I quickly noticed that Wandlebury was actually on the Mary line, the famous energy line of the Son and the Serpent fame, and this really triggered a whole awakening for me into this area of subtle energies research across the landscape. And also, obviously, it connects directly with Avebury and Glastonbury, and I now live in Glastonbury partly because of this, just to sort of continue various research down there. And interestingly, when I first went to Glastonbury about 6 years ago now, it was actually on the tail of the Girt Dog of Langport. I actually got given a copy of this book. I didn't know anything about it before, and this is the snappily titled book by Christian and Barbara Joy O'Brien, called An Integrated Astronomical Complex of Earthworks at Wandlebury in Hatfield Forest from the 3rd millennium BC, published in 1976. So the first day I ever went and experienced the Glastonbury Zodiac, which Yuri talked about earlier, I went to the tail of the Girt Dog of Langport, and David Hatfield gave me this book immediately. I just couldn't believe it. It was kind of like one of them beautiful synchronicities that really helped open up, my area of research at Wandlebury. So it's that whole thing where you have to go a long way away to another part of the sacred landscape of your home country to actually find stuff about your hometown and your home sacred sites. So and to look at it from another perspective, it really enabled me to look at it clearly and from a sort of, just stand back and actually re-look at the landscape. And since then, the research and the megalithic finds have just cascaded. And I met Edmund Marriage as well, through Nigel Blair. And the research has really opened up. So there's a whole load of different aspects I really want to look at today. Oh, excuse me a second. Mainly, obviously, at the research of Christian and Barbara Joy O'Brien, and evidence which backs up their claims that there was this incredible megalithic alignment stretching from Wandlebury all the way down to Hatfield Forest, which virtually follows the M11, if anyone knows that motorway. So I'm really asking, was this 26-mile alignment designed and built by the same people who built Avebury, Silbury Hill and the early part of Stonehenge? Because according to the O'Briens, we are looking at a similar time frame, which is roughly 2500 BC. And there's quite a few other aspects we can look at as well. For instance, I mean, there's a whole story about Wandlebury, really, that stretches back for different eras of history, going back about 5,000 years. So first of all, I'm going to look at the landscape of the Magog Hills and have a look at what that name really means, and the giants and how they're associated with that. And also other legends associated with that, and the discovery of chalk hill figures, which Tom Lethbridge, or T.C. Lethbridge, discovered in the 1950s, which are very controversial because the archaeologists and historians aren't having it. They're basically saying he made them up. But we'll have a quick look at that as well. And obviously the Loxodrome alignment, we'll have a good look at that, and new discoveries on it, and Neolithic evidence to back that up. And even the archaeologists are now saying the whole Wandlebury area is actually a Neolithic ritual landscape, and it's not just a single so-called Iron Age hill fort, according to other earlier historians. So we're going to look at some other ley lines, or straight line alignments, which go from Wandlebury, because the Loxodrome initially, Christian O'Brien was quite inspired by a talk he went to about ley lines and about Alfred Watkins' theory. So we're going to have a look at some other leys around that area as well, and also the earth energies, particularly, obviously, the Mary energy line, and the Avebury and Silbury Hill connections. And very interestingly, there's a book called Where Troy Once Stood, which claims that the whole Troy saga, the Iliad and the Odyssey, and the whole great wars that took place in the Bronze Age, were actually based at Wandlebury and that whole Magog Hills area. And I was quite intrigued by that, because I've been talking to a couple of archaeologists in Cambridge who claim that there's a huge amount of evidence to now back that up. And the new version of his book, Ivan Wilkins, he's building the case very well. And we'll have a look at some of the key points of that a little bit later. So I'm really asking, were the megalithic builders of Wandlebury, were these people who built the ancient sites, the famous ancient sites all across Britain and possibly the world, actually in our local landscape of East Anglia? This is a nice painting by Richard Rellam from 1801, which shows you the kind of basic, it's quite an exaggerated version of what the hill fort actually looks like. It's basically a large ring ditch, but this is very exaggerated. This looks more like Avebury at a glance, doesn't it? But I just wanted to show you this is how it was seen back in the early 1800s. But Wandlebury itself is based upon the Magog Hills, and we'll have a look at the hills first. So I want to sort of put it into like context, sort of landscape context of what we're going to talk about today. Number one, giants were found at the war ditches, which I've already mentioned. So a lot of people relate Magog to be these giants. We'll have a look at that in a moment. In the 1950s, children from Cherry Hinton were warned to stay away from the hills because they might wake the giants. In 1574, a special decree was issued forbidding Cambridge University students from frequenting the Magog Hills, and a fine would be imposed if they did. And also, obviously, we have the Giant's Grave back in Cherry Hinton. We'll have a look at that site next. And that's obviously a reference to Magog. And also, it's and there's a stone next door to the Giant's Grave in the Robin Hood and Little John pub, which is another reference to giants. So one of the earliest reports of the Magog Hills having that name is from Michael Drayton in the Polly Albion 1 and 20th song. I'll just read this out to you, because this is quite a nice little piece. "O Magog, a hill of long and great renown, which near to Cambridge fet, looks the learned town." The rest of the song tells a story about how the giant fell in love with a nymph called Granta, which is actually the original name of the River Cam. And however hard he tried to woo her by tempting her with presents and changing his appearance, she still rejected him. Ah, okay. So he's probably got a little bit of a complex since then. So this is the Giant's Grave, and this is the megalith that I discovered there. I mean, I used to actually go to this pub, the Robin Hood and Little John pub, in my late teenage years. And you can see that it's actually got a great big footprint in it as well, which is the same size as my foot, which is size 10.5. Which I almost got it stuck in there, actually. This is the Giant's Grave, which is just over the road. You can see this here, and this is a sort of winter photo. There's actually a tumuli in this little dip as well. It sort of dips down into this little part, and you can just see it on the crossroads at the end of Cherry Hinton, at the very base of Limekiln Hill. It's a very interesting little place. And it's a natural spring, also called Spring Head, Robin Hood Dip, and Spring Field.